story time. Today we're going to read books about wagons, and some of our books are about toy wagons, like the little red wagons that you might have one in your garage. And the other books are about pioneer wagons, so like the great big wagons people used to cross the prairie with. So our first one is Red Wagon. Lucy had a brand new little red wagon. She wanted to play with it immediately. She asked her mother, "Sure, you can use your wagon to go to the market." That sounded like a chore. Lucy didn't want to do chores. But she set out to the market. She pulled her red wagon up the hill. It was pretty heavy. At the top of the hill, it started to rain. Oh, bother. Lucy quickly pushed the wagon down the hill. By the time she got to the bottom, it was really coming down. Soon the rain stopped and the sun came out. She continued on her way. At last, Lucy arrived at the market. Lucy neatly loaded the wagon with the vegetables from her list. And she hauled them back up the hill. She was almost down again when the wagon hit a rock. Luckily, the wagon was okay. So was Lucy. She gathered the vegetables and put them back into her wagon. When she got home, her mother was waiting for her. "Thank you, Lucy. What a big help." Finally, Lucy was free to play with her wagon. Lucy went on quite an adventure, didn't she, with her imagination and her wagon. Wagons can help you go on all kinds of fun make-believe adventures. Our next story is called Friday, My Radio Flyer Flew. One Saturday, I searched. And my dad's old radio flyer surfaced. That Sunday, we went for a stroll. Then on Monday morning, I got motivated. Maybe that old flyer could really move. So all day Tuesday, I tinkered. And by twilight, my flyer twinkled. But Wednesday was wet, so we had to wait. On Thursday, I tried to take off. But took tumble after tumble. finally, on Friday, I focused and my radio flyer flew. And flew. And flew. And that's the end. Our next book is titled Going West. Do you see the wagon on this one? It's not a red radio flyer wagon, but it's a covered wagon that the pioneers used. And this one is by Jean Van Leeuwen. One day, early spring, we packed everything we had into our wagon, tied our milk cow Sadie on behind, and set out to find a new home, going west. There were 5 of us, Papa and Mama, me, Hannah, just turned 7, my little brother Jake, and Rebecca, a fat baby with yellow curls. Mama cried. She was leaving her 3 sisters and all our furniture and the piano she loved to play. But Papa said we were going to a place where anything you planted could grow on and a farm could stretch out as far as the eye could see. We left behind the town we knew, the woods, the hills. We rode, bouncing and swaying in the creaking wagon, day after day. At night, Mama cooked over a campfire, and we slept close together on the wagon floor, with stars winking through the opening of our canvas roof. There's a picture of them setting up camp for the night. Here is what was in our wagon: blankets and pillows and quilts, Mama's favorite rocking chair, trunks full of clothes, barrels full of food, a cook stove, a box of tin dishes, all of Mama's cooking pots, all of Papa's tools, a Bible, a rifle, and a spinning wheel. There was barely room for us. Sometimes it rained. Our wagon got stuck in the mud, and we all had to get out and push. Once it rained so hard that the wagon leaked. That night we slept in wet clothes and wet beds without any supper. Rebecca cried, and Jake said he wanted to go home. Mama didn't say anything, but I think she felt the same. We were all tired of the rocking wagon and the dust and the same net sights day after day. Jake fell out and hurt his arm. Rebecca caught a cold. At night she coughed and coughed. Mama looked worried, but still we rode on, going west. We came to a river, all muddy and wide. How will we get across? I asked Papa. The horses will take us, he said. First the water came up to the horses' knees, and then their chests. Suddenly Papa shouted, "Hold on tight!" The horses were swimming. Water was pouring into the wagon. Mama held me tight until at last I felt the horses' feet touch the bottom again. We had crossed the river. On the other side of the river, the land was flat, with no trees. There was not a bush or stone, nothing but green waving grass and blue sky, and a constant whispering wind. It seemed a lonely, empty place. But Papa said, "This is the land we've been looking for." As the sun was setting, we came upon a place where wildflowers bloomed in the mounds of pink and lavender and blue like soft pillows. "Look," said Mama, smiling, and Papa said, "Here is where we will build our house." The next day we began. Papa took the horses and rode away. When he came back, he brought logs from the creek. For many days he worked. Slowly, with Mama helping, he built walls, a roof, a door, Finally, he took Mama's rocking chair and set it next to our new fireplace. It was only one room with a dirt floor, but at last we slept in the house again. Mama planted a garden. Jake carried water from the creek to do the washing. I minded the baby and swept the dirt floor and helped Mama hang checked curtains on the windows. "There," she said, "we are ready for visitors." But no visitors came. We were alone on the vast prairie. Papa rode away again, many miles to town. For 3 long days we watched and waited. And then Papa came back. He brought flour and bacon and 6 sheep that he traded for one of the horses, and a surprise, real white sugar. Mama baked a cake, and it reminded me of home. Summer came. A hot wind blew. Papa went out hunting for rabbits, and Jake and I picked blackberries next to the creek. Mama lay down in the grass with the sheep. "Oh my," she sighed when we found her. "This is a lonesome land." Day after day, the sun beat down, baking our little house, shriveling up the plants in the garden. It was so hot that nothing moved, not even the wind. "If only we had a tree for shade," said Mama. One afternoon, when Jake and I were at the creek, dark clouds suddenly covered the sun. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. We ran for home, but before we got there, hail came tumbling out of the sky, big and round and hard as marbles. "Quick," I shouted, "the buckets!" We put them over our heads and kept running. Mama was waiting at the door. "Thank goodness you're safe," she said. When the storm was over, Mama's garden was squashed flat. "The land is good," she said, "but the weather is hard." "Never mind," said Papa. "In the spring we will plant again." Mama was frying donuts, and Jake and I were doing lessons in the dirt floor when visitors finally came. Indians! Jake hid under the bed. I crept behind the rocking chair. My knees trembled with fright. They looked so fierce. But Mama smiled. She gave one of the Indians a donut. The Indian smiled. Mama kept on making donuts, and the Indians kept on eating donuts until Papa came home, and then the Indians went away. The wind turned cold. Mama stored up potatoes and berries and nuts for the long winter to come. Papa went hunting for deer. He came back with Mr. Swinson. Mr. Swinson stayed for supper, and after he played his flute while Mama sang, sitting around the fire. And suddenly the prairie wasn't empty anymore. We had a neighbor. "Do they have Christmas out here?" Jake asked, and I wondered too. But Mama said, "Of course." So we hung our stockings by the chimney. Rebecca got a cup and Jake a whistle, and I found Nellie a rag doll with yellow braids. Later, we had wild turkey for dinner, and Mama opened the jam she'd been saving all year, and everything was just like Christmas. Now the icy wind seeped through the cracks of our log walls. We had put on all our clothes we had and huddled next to the fire. One morning, it was so cold that Mama's fresh-baked bread was frozen solid. And then it began to snow. It snowed for 3 days and 3 nights. Papa tied a rope from the house to the stable so he could feed the animals. Jake and I did our lessons, and Mama helped me sew on my quilt, and we all listened to the wind howling outside. At last, everything grew still. Looking out, we saw no woodpile, no stable, no sky, nothing but snow drifting up to the roof of our little house. It was a long, cold winter. We had nothing to eat but potatoes and hard biscuits and nuts. Rebecca cried because she was hungry, and one day Mama counted the potatoes and said there are only 6 left. But then, slowly, the snow began to melt. Each day, drifts under our window grew smaller. Papa took down his rifle and went hunting again, and that night the smell of rabbit stew made our house warm once more. One morning, when the grass was turning new green, Papa said, "It's planting time." He hitched our horse to the plow and broke through the tough prairie grass to the dark, rich soil beneath. For days he worked, plowing long, straight rows. Then Mama dropped in seeds, and Jake and I covered them up. The warm sun shone. The seeds sprouted, and all around us, as far as our eyes could see, was our farm. It was Mama's birthday. Jake and I picked flowers for the table. Papa brought home a surprise, a little tree from the creek to plant by the front door. Next year, if the corn does well, he said, we'll buy a piano. And Mr. Swenson came for dinner with another surprise, his new wife. Welcome to our house, said Mama. We ate Mama's food and listened to Mrs. Swenson tell about back east and sang, sitting around the fire. Outside, the soft wind was blowing in the new corn. I looked around at Mama in her rocking chair and Rebecca sleeping and Jake leaning on Papa's knee, and our house felt like home. So they went through quite an adventure to make a new home in a new land, didn't they? We've got one more, and this one is called Ox Cart Man. And again, we can see an old-fashioned wagon that's got a canvas cover on top. In October, he backed his ox into his cart, and he and his family filled it up with everything they made or grew all year long that was left over. He packed a bag of wool he sheared from a sheep in April. He packed a shawl his wife wove on a loom from yarn spun at the spinning wheel from the sheep sheared in April. He packed 5 pairs of mittens his daughter knit from yarn spun at the spinning wheel from his sheep sheared in April. He packed candles the family made. He packed linen made from flax they grew. He packed shingles he split himself. He packed birch brooms his son carved with a borrowed kitchen knife. He packed potatoes they dug from their garden, but first he counted out potatoes enough to eat all winter and potatoes for seed next spring. He packed a barrel of apples, honey and honeycombs, turnips and cabbages, a wooden box of maple sugar from the maples they tapped in March, when they boiled and boiled and boiled the sap away. He packed a bag of goose feathers that his children collected from the barnyard geese. When his cart was full, he waved goodbye to his wife, his daughter, and his son, and he walked at the ox's head 10 days, over hills, through valleys, by streams, past farms and villages. Until he came to Portsmouth and Portsmouth Market. He sold the bag of wool. He sold the shawl his wife made. He sold 5 pairs of mittens. He sold candles and shingles. He sold birch brooms. He sold potatoes. He sold apples. He sold honey and honeycombs, turnips and cabbages. He sold maple sugar. He sold a bag of goose feathers. Then he sold the wooden box he carried the maple sugar in. Then he sold the barrel he carried the apples in. Then he sold the bag he carried the potatoes in. Then he sold his ox cart. Then he sold his ox and kissed him goodbye on his nose. Then he sold the ox's yoke and harness. With his pocket full of coins, he walked through Portsmouth Market. He bought an iron kettle to hang over the fire at home. And for his daughter, he brought an embroidery needle that came from a boat in the harbor that had sailed all the way from England. And for his son, he bought a Barlow knife for carving birch brooms with. And for the whole family, he bought 2 pounds of wintergreen peppermint candies. Then he walked home with the needle and the knife and the wintergreen peppermint candies tucked into the kettle, and a stick over his shoulder strung through the kettle's handle, and the coins still in his pockets. past farms and villages, over hills, through valleys, and by streams, until he came to his farm, and his son and his daughter and his wife were waiting. His daughter took her needle and began stitching. His son took his barlow knife and started whittling, and they cooked dinner in their new kettle. And afterward, everyone ate a wintergreen peppermint candy. And that night, the ox cart man sat in front of his fire, stitching new harness for the young ox in the barn. And he carved a new yoke, and sawed planks for a new cart, and split shingles all winter. While his wife made flax into linen all winter, and his daughter embroidered linen all winter, and his son carved Indian brooms from birch all winter, and everybody made candles. And in March they tapped the sugar maple trees and boiled the sap down. And in April they sheared the sheep, spun yarn, and wove and knitted. And in May they planted potatoes, turnips, and cabbages, while apple blossoms bloomed and fell, while bees woke up, starting to make new honey. And geese squawked in the barnyard, dropping feathers as soft as clouds. So this is a fun book that shows a whole year of an old-fashioned life on a farm, and how they would make things and take them to market in their wagons and carts, and then come back and make more things. We have lots of books about pioneer life and wagons and farms at our library, so you can stop by and check them out sometime. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, bye.